I had just scored the goal. The goal. The one they would replay 1,000 times. The one that sent us to the World Cup final. The one that made the commentator lose his voice mid-sentence. 78th minute, down by 1, the ball dropping out of the sky at the edge of the box. And I hit it. I didn't think about it. 8 years of professional football collapses into instinct in a moment like that. You don't decide. You just do it. And then the net moved. And the sound that came out of 67,000 people was not really sound anymore. It was a weather. It was something physical that hit me in the chest before I even fully processed what had happened. I ran. I didn't know where I was running. I just ran, arms out, screaming something I couldn't even hear over the noise. My teammates caught me. We became a pile of human beings near the corner flag, all of us laughing and crying and not fully believing any of it was real. And then the stadium camera found the family section, the way it always does in moments like that. And the whole stadium could see what I couldn't, because the big screen above the far end of the pitch was showing the family section in real time. An old woman was standing up. She was tiny, maybe 5 feet tall on a generous day. She was wearing my jersey, the number 8, my number, over what appeared to be her Sunday church dress. She was waving a small flag so hard it looked like it might detach from the pole. She had on the kind of wide-brimmed hat you wear to outdoor events when you are a woman of a certain age and dignity, except the hat had my name written on it in what I would later discover was fabric paint applied by her own arthritic hands the night before. The whole stadium saw her before I did. And 67,000 people. People from 40 different countries, people who didn't speak each other's languages, people who had come to this tournament as rivals. 67,000 people started cheering for her. Just for her. My grandmother, Mama Eudora, 81 years old, who had never been on an airplane before in her life. Who had never left the country before in her life. Who had been saving coins, actual coins, in an actual tin on the shelf above her kitchen sink, for 8 years to be in that stadium on that night. I found out she was there about 30 seconds before that camera caught her. And I want to tell you the whole story. Because the story of how that woman got to that stadium is the most important story of my life. And without understanding the beginning of it, the parts that nearly broke me, the people who laughed, the years that went dark before they got light, you cannot fully understand what it meant when I looked up at that screen and saw her face. So let me start at the beginning. But before I do, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I am so glad you found us. This is the place where we tell real stories. Human stories. Stories about the people who were counted out and came back. Stories about love that survived everything thrown at it. Stories that remind you, when you need reminding, that the thing you're carrying is worth carrying. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now. I mean it. Do it before the story starts and you forget, because once we get into Henry's story, I promise you, you are not going to want to stop. And if you've been here before, you already know. You know what we do here. Share this one. Someone in your life needs this story today. I don't know who it is, but you do. Subscribe. Share. And let's go. My name is Henry Osei, and I come from a town so small that when I tell people the name of it, they nod politely in the way people nod when they have absolutely no idea what you're referring to but don't want to say so. It's a real place. I want to be clear about that. It exists on maps, and it has a post office and a church and a market day on Thursdays and a football pitch with one working goal and one goal where the crossbar has been broken for 11 years and nobody has fixed it. That pitch, that specific pitch with the broken crossbar and the grass that grew in ambitious patches and the mud that appeared every rainy season like an old tenant returning, that pitch is where I learned to play football. And I mean learned in the most foundational, molecular sense of the word. Not tactics, not technique, those came later. First I learned what the game felt like. What it felt like when the ball did exactly what you asked it to do. What it felt like to run with it and have it stay with you like something alive, something obedient to your intention. I was 7 when I discovered that I could do something with a football that other people couldn't quite replicate. I want to be careful not to make this sound grander than it was. I was 7, playing with other 7-year-olds on a broken pitch. Nobody was identifying me as the next anything. But there was something. I felt it and the other children felt it too, the way children feel these things before adults teach them not to trust what they're sensing. My mother's name was Rose. She worked at the market, selling vegetables, fabrics, whatever was available in season. And she was gone early and home late, and in between she was tired in the way that women who work that hard are tired, a tiredness that lives in the bones, not just the muscles. She was not interested in football. She was interested in school grades and church attendance, and whether I'd eaten enough, and whether my school uniform was clean. My father, Thomas, was a mechanic. He could fix anything with an engine and a set of hands and patience. He watched football on weekends when there was a working television nearby, and he had opinions about it, the way most men in that town had opinions about it, but he didn't see it as a path. He saw it as a weekend thing, the same way other people saw it as a weekend thing. The person who saw it differently was Mama Eudora, my grandmother on my mother's side. She lived 3 streets from us in a house that smelled like cocoa butter and something she was always cooking, and the particular warmth of a space that has been inhabited by the same person for decades, absorbing their presence into the walls. She was 73 years old when I was 7, and she was the most quietly powerful person I have ever known. I say quietly powerful, and I want to explain what I mean. She wasn't loud. She didn't dominate rooms. She didn't give speeches. What she did was see. She had an extraordinary quality of attention, the kind where you feel, when she was watching you, that every part of what you were doing was being registered and understood. Children perform for adults who they sense are watching them this way. I performed for Mama Eudora constantly without ever intending to. She used to come to that broken pitch on Saturday mornings and watch me play. Not every Saturday. Sometimes her knees were bad, and the walk was longer than it needed to be on bad knee days. But often enough. She would sit on the concrete step at the edge of the pitch. She always brought her own cloth to sit on, because she had opinions about concrete steps and their impact on good church dresses, and she would watch. Afterward she would say very specific things. Not, "You played well," or "I'm proud of you," though she said those too. Specific things. "You see the space before the other boys," she said once when I was 8. "You know where the ball is going to be, not where it is." I didn't know what to do with that analysis from an old woman on a concrete step. But it landed somewhere. Mama Eudora believed in me as a footballer before I believed in myself as one, and significantly before anyone else did. This mattered more than I can fully measure, because the environment around me did not especially encourage the belief. My parents were not unkind about it. They were realistic, in the specific way of people for whom realism has been a survival strategy. When I started talking seriously about football, at 12, 13, starting to understand that there was a pathway from this pitch to something larger, my father listened with the patience of a man who loves his child and said, "Henry, there are 1,000 boys like you on 1,000 pitches just like this one. Very few of them make it. Work on your grades." My mother said, "Whatever you want to do, finish school first." These were not wrong things to say. I want to be fair to them. They were not wrong things to say. They were the things you say when you love someone and you know how many people carry this dream and how few of them arrive at the destination. But they did not believe. Not really. And a child who is developing an extraordinary skill in a world that doesn't believe in it develops the belief primarily from the people who do. For me, for the first decade of my life as a footballer, that person was one woman. 73, then 75, then 80 years old. Sitting on her cloth on a concrete step. Seeing me before I could see myself. I was 13 when the scout came to the town. He wasn't there for me specifically. He was passing through, a regional scout for a youth academy in the capital, doing a sweep of smaller towns as part of a development program that was more about due diligence than genuine expectation. You check the smaller towns because sometimes something unexpected is there, and it costs less in retrospect to have checked than to have missed something. It was a Thursday, which was market day, which meant most of the adults in my town were otherwise occupied, which meant the pitch was full of boys playing because there was nothing else to do and everything else was at the market. The scout sat in a car at the edge of the pitch for about 20 minutes, watching. Then he got out of the car and walked over and asked who organized the games. Nobody organized the games. The games organized themselves. He found this answer charming and slightly confusing. He watched for another 40 minutes and then he asked me my name. That evening he came to our house. He sat across from my parents in our living room, my father on his good chair, my mother beside him, Me on the edge of the room feeling like my heart was trying to exit my body through my chest wall, and he said he'd like me to come to a trial at the academy in the capital. A week-long residential program. They'd cover costs. My father asked a great many reasonable questions. What was the success rate? What happened to the boys who didn't make it? Was there any educational component? Was this binding in any way? The scout answered patiently. My mother said very little. She looked at me once, in the middle of the conversation, and the look contained something I hadn't fully seen from her before. Not belief exactly. Something more provisional. Something that said, maybe. Mama Eudora was not at that meeting. But I went to her house afterward and told her everything. She was in her kitchen, which is where she always was at that hour. She listened to me without interruption, sitting across from me at her kitchen table, her hands folded in front of her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're going to go and you're going to show them exactly what I've been watching for 6 years." "What if they don't take me?" I asked. She looked at me over her glasses. "Then you come home and you work harder and you try again. But they'll take you. How do you know?" "Because," she said, and she reached across the table and put her hand over mine, "you have something in you that cannot be taught. I've watched coaches try to teach it to other boys for years. You were born with it. That doesn't go away because some man in an office doesn't recognize it on the first look." I held on to that. I held on to it for the entire week of the trial, through the moments of doubt and comparison, and the particular anxiety of being new in a room full of boys who had been training in organized environments for years, and who moved with a fluency that made my pitch-learned game feel ragged by comparison. They took me. My father shook the academy director's hand when the call came. My mother cried, quietly, in the kitchen. Mama Eudora, when I told her, stood up from her chair at the kitchen table and did a small, contained, entirely dignified version of a dance, and then sat back down and said, "I know. Now go and pack." The academy was in the capital and it was a different world. I don't mean this romantically. I mean it practically, functionally, in every logistical and cultural sense. Different pace. Different expectations. Different language of social interaction that I had to learn alongside the technical football development. Boys from cities move differently than boys from small towns. Not better, not worse, but differently, with a fluency in urban social codes that I didn't have and that my football ability, however genuine, couldn't fully substitute for. The training was exceptional. The coaches knew their craft and they knew what they were looking for, and they worked us with a precision I had never experienced. My body changed in the first year. The difference between self-directed practice on a broken pitch and structured professional training is the difference between teaching yourself and being taught. Both are real. The second is more efficient. I made progress. Real progress, measurable progress, the kind that coaches note and mark and track. By the end of my first year, I was in the top third of my age group. By the second year, I was regularly among the first names on the team sheet. But here's the thing about an academy environment. It is also a social environment, and social environments have their own hierarchies and cruelties that operate independently of performance metrics. There was a group of boys, 4 or 5 of them, all from the capital, all with the easy confidence of children whose parents had connections in the football world and who knew it, who decided early on that I was a curiosity worth diminishing. The boy from the small town with the broken crossbar pitch. They called me Village for 2 years. Not maliciously, they would have said, it was just a nickname, just a joke, just banter. The way that casual cruelty always defends itself. Just banter. Can't you take a joke? I could take the joke. What I couldn't take as easily was what the joke communicated underneath the joke. That where I came from was something to be ashamed of. That the pitch with the broken crossbar was a deficit to overcome rather than the foundation of everything I was. That I was less than these boys because I hadn't grown up in their world. The leader of this group was a boy named Felix. Quick, skilled, a genuine talent in his own right, which somehow made it worse. Mediocre people's mockery is easier to discard. Talented people's mockery has more traction because you can't dismiss the source. Felix was quick and clever with a football and quick and clever with words, and he used both with similar casualness. He mocked the way I ate. The clothes I brought from home. The fact that I phoned Mama Eudora every Sunday evening without fail, which he somehow found out about and found endlessly amusing. Calling your grandma again, village? Does she know you're in the big city now? I want to tell you that I handled this with grace and equanimity, and it rolled off me. I didn't. I was 14. It didn't roll off me. It got under my skin and sat there and infected my confidence in the low-grade, persistent way that sustained mockery does. Not destroying you, but creating a background noise of doubt that you have to work harder to override. What I did, because I had no other option that felt right, was work. I worked harder than anyone in that program. I was first to the pitch and last off it. I watched footage. I asked coaches questions. I found the gap between where I was and where I needed to be, and I filled it with the only currency I had, which was effort and attention. Felix, who was naturally talented and knew it and had been told so too often, stopped developing in his second year. The gap between us, which had started with him ahead, began to close. By our third year, I was ahead. Not because I was more gifted. I don't know whether I was or wasn't. But because I worked as if my gifts weren't enough, and he worked as if his were. He called me village on the last day of that academy year. Standing in the training ground parking lot, waiting for his father to pick him up. He said it the way you say something you've said so many times it's habit. Heading home for the summer, village? Back to the broken crossbar. I looked at him. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. And something in my look must have told him what the scoreboard already showed, because he looked away first. That was the last time he said it. I need to tell you about the Sunday phone calls. Because they're the thread that runs through the whole story, and without understanding them, the rest doesn't make full sense. Every Sunday, 7 o'clock in the evening, I called Mama Eudora. Through the academy years. Through the professional years. Through the bad seasons and the good seasons and the transfers and the injuries and the coming back from injuries. Every Sunday, 7 o'clock. She was never not there. In 8 years of Sunday calls, I have thought about this, I have actually counted, she was late to the phone exactly twice. Once because her neighbor Mrs. Comfort had needed help with something that ran longer than expected. Once because she'd fallen asleep in her chair after church and her granddaughter had to wake her. Both times she apologized when she picked up, in the formal, complete way she apologized for everything. Henry, I am sorry to have kept you waiting. It was unavoidable. How are you, my child? Those calls were the anchor of my week. I didn't fully understand that until later, until I had enough perspective to see what the structure was. At the time it just felt like talking to Mama Eudora. Telling her about training, about matches, about the city, about the people I was meeting. She listened with the same complete attention she'd brought to the pitch, and she asked the specific questions that told you she'd been retaining everything you'd told her the week before. She told me about the town, the market, Mrs. Comfort's ongoing disagreements with the woman in the next stall, the church choir's new song that she either loved or thought was inappropriate. Her opinion on this changed week to week. The mango tree in her back garden that she was in a years-long negotiation with regarding the timing and volume of its output. She told me about the coin tin. Not directly. Not on purpose. Came up in the way things come up when you talk to someone every week. Sideways, in the context of other things. The first time was when I was 15. She mentioned that she'd been keeping a savings, a little something, was how she put it, for a special purpose. I asked what the purpose was. She said she hadn't decided yet, and then asked me about a match I'd mentioned, and that was the end of it. The second time was when I was 17, newly signed to the professional ranks of a mid-tier club, exhilarated and terrified, and calling her from a dormitory room that was smaller than her pantry. She mentioned the savings again. I added to it this week. I asked again what it was for. She smiled. I could hear her smile through the phone, and said, "You'll know when it's time." Over the years, the tin became a kind of running thread. She mentioned it periodically, always without detail, always with that particular quality of deliberate mystery that she deployed on occasion, and that I'd learned meant she knew something I didn't and intended to keep it that way until she decided otherwise. I didn't know it was coins until much later. I didn't know how long she'd been doing it. I didn't know what it was for, though I suspected. I think I suspected, without ever fully letting myself believe it, because believing it felt too large, too much of a claim on her love that I didn't want to make wrongly. What I knew was this: every Sunday, 7 o'clock, she was there. And somewhere in her kitchen, on the shelf above the sink, a tin was getting heavier. Professional football is not a straight line. I say this because stories about athletic careers tend to compress the middle, and the middle is where everything actually happens. The middle is where the character forms. The highs are visible. The lows, the quiet, persistent, grinding lows, are where you find out who you are. My career started well. I was 19 when I broke into the first team properly, starting matches, not just coming off the bench. I was quick and technically strong, and I had the reading of the game that Mama Eudora had noted when I was 8, which translated at the professional level into a quality that coaches found useful and opponents found frustrating. I knew where the ball was going before it got there. I was rarely in the wrong place. My club was ambitious. They were pushing for promotion. The season I broke in, we went up. I was part of that. I felt the specific electricity of success that comes early in a career, the sense that the road ahead is wide and clear and very fast. And then the injury. I was 21. A tackle in training. Not malicious, just the wrong angle, the wrong surface, the wrong moment. I heard the pop before I felt the pain, and then I felt the pain, and it was the kind of pain that tells you something real has happened, something structural, something that is going to cost you more than you want to calculate in the moment. Anterior cruciate ligament. The knee. The injury that ends careers if you're unlucky, and costs you a year if you're not. I was not unlucky, but I was not lucky either. I was just in it for the entirety of it. The surgery, the rehabilitation, the specific psychological experience of being an athlete whose body has betrayed them in a way that requires you to relearn movement from almost the beginning. There were very dark weeks in that rehabilitation period. I don't think I need to dramatize them. They were what they were, and anyone who has been through a significant injury knows exactly what those weeks feel like. The doubt that arrives because your identity has been built on something your body can currently not do. The fear that the thing you can normally do better than almost anyone is permanently diminished. I called Mama Eudora every Sunday. Every single Sunday. She never once told me it would be fine. She never offered false reassurance in the form of "it will all work out." What she said was, "What did you do in your rehabilitation this week?" And then she listened. And then she said, "What are you doing next week?" She kept me oriented forward. Not optimistically. Not in the cheerful, performative way of people who are afraid of your grief and trying to rush you past it. Practically. Specifically. With the attention of someone who is tracking your progress the way she once tracked me on that pitch. Not because she needed to demonstrate her attention, but because paying attention is how she loved. I came back from the injury at 22. Slower at first. The knee was good, but trust takes longer than repair. I spent 6 months recalibrating. My first match back I played 40 minutes and was so exhausted at the end of it that I sat in the dressing room afterward unable to speak. But I came back. And then, fully back, something happened that I hadn't expected. I was better. Not just recovered to where I'd been. Better. Because the year of rehabilitation had forced a level of technical refinement I hadn't needed when athleticism could carry certain things. And that refinement showed in how I moved and read the game. I was 23 and newly good in a way that was different from how I'd been good before, and the football world, which is a small world in some ways, where knowledge of who is doing what travels quickly, began to notice. This is the part one find hardest to tell. Not because it was the worst thing that happened, it wasn't, but because it came from a direction I hadn't protected myself against. When I broke into the professional game at 19, I brought a small group of people from home into the expanded life that career creates. Friends from the town. Guys I'd grown up with, played on that broken pitch with, shared the particular intimacy of a small-town childhood with. 3 of them in particular. Kwaku, Dennis, and Otto. My people. My history. The ones who knew me before any of this. I want to be careful here, because I don't want to tell this in the way that makes me sound like a victim of simple betrayal and them sound like simple villains. The truth is more complicated and more human than that. What happened was, money and proximity to success changes the social chemistry between people in ways that nobody announces and that take time to fully register. When I started earning, first modestly, then better, then well, There was an adjustment period with these friendships. At first everything was fine. I helped when I could, as you do with people you love. Kwaku needed money for his mother's medical treatment. I helped. Dennis was starting a small business and needed capital. I contributed. Otto had a difficult period and needed somewhere to stay. He stayed at my apartment for 4 months. These things I gave without resentment. Genuinely without resentment. They were my people. The problem is that generosity, when unexamined, can become a different relationship without either party fully meaning it to. I became, over 2 years, a resource as much as a friend. And I didn't notice it happening because the transition was too gradual and I was too busy and I loved them too much to look at it directly. The injury was when it became visible. When I was injured, 21, one of the worst periods of my life. Kwaku called twice in the first week and then became progressively harder to reach. Dennis, who had opinions about everything at all times, was suddenly full of opinions about whether I'd come back from this kind of injury and what the statistics were and whether I should consider other options. These opinions were delivered with a kind of casual certainty that was devastating in its timing. Otto, who had lived in my apartment, who had eaten my food and used my space and borrowed my car on 3 separate occasions, called me 6 weeks after the surgery and asked if I could still help with something he needed because he understood I was going through a hard time, but this was also quite urgent. I helped him. I'm not proud of that. I helped him because I didn't yet know how to say no to the people I loved, and I hadn't yet learned that love and boundary are not opposites. When I came back from the injury and started playing again, and then playing better, and then the football world starting to notice, the phone calls picked back up. Kwaku reappeared. Dennis had a new business idea he wanted to discuss. Otto needed something else. The breaking point came at 24, a dinner that should have been a celebration. I just signed a new contract, a significant one, a sign of the club's belief in my recovery and development. I took the 3 of them out. Good restaurant, my treat, as it always was. Halfway through dinner, Kwaku said something that I have thought about many times since. He said it casually, laughing, like it was funny. Henry man, honestly, you remember when you used to practice headers in the market square and everyone told you that you were wasting your time? Even your own father said you should go learn a trade. Everyone at the table laughed. Including, and this is the part one can't fully explain me. Because social laughter is its own reflex and I hadn't yet learned to stop it. But underneath the laugh, something registered. Something that said, he's telling that story to diminish where you came from so that the distance between you feels smaller. Because the distance makes him uncomfortable. Then Dennis said, your dad really didn't believe in you, hey? Told my uncle once that he thought you were wasting your potential on football. And Otto said, at least you proved them wrong. And there it was. 3 sentences in a row that were dressed as celebration but were actually something else. Something that needed me to be the boy from the broken crossbar pitch who overcame doubt, so that they could position themselves as the ones who'd always believed, the ones who'd been there, the ones who deserved the proximity to where I'd ended up. They were rewriting the history we'd shared in real time. At a dinner I was paying for. I didn't say anything that night. I drove home and I sat in my car and I let the thing I'd been not seeing for 2 years finally come into focus. These were not my friends. They were people I'd known a long time who had once been my friends and had become something else when the stakes changed, and I had loved them too much and looked too carefully away to see it clearly. I grieved that. I won't pretend I didn't. Some losses are clean and some are complicated, and the complicated ones, where the person wasn't a villain, just human in a particular costly way, those take longer. I called Mama Eudora the next Sunday. I told her everything. She was quiet through all of it. And when I finished, she said, how long have you known? And what did you do with the knowledge? I kept going. I kept grinding. Good, she said. That's right. And how about the friendships? I think I need to let them go. Another pause came. Some people, she said, are in your life for a chapter. They don't know it and you don't know it, and the chapter ends and it hurts. But a chapter ending doesn't erase what was in it. Those boys were real friends to you when you were children. Hold that. Let the rest go. I let the rest go. And I found out what remains when you clear the people who drain you. Space. Energy. Room to build real things. 25 to 28 were the years I built on the foundation that all the hard previous years had made. A transfer to a club in a better league. A manager. His name was Coach Darko, a former Yugoslav professional with the specific football intelligence of someone who had played and then spent 30 years converting that playing knowledge into coaching genius, who saw exactly what I was and knew precisely how to use it. Coach Darko didn't see me the way most coaches had seen me. Most coaches saw an athletic midfielder with good technical skills and good game reading. Coach Darko saw something different. He saw a player who could be the structural center of something. The midfielder around whom a team was organized, not just in terms of shape but in terms of tempo, pressure, and transition. He explained this to me in our first one-on-one meeting, drawing on a whiteboard with a focused pleasure of someone talking about the thing they love. You see the game 2 seconds ahead, he said. Most players see it in real time. Some see it 1 second ahead. You see it at 2 seconds, which means you are never in the wrong position. You are always where the ball needs you to be next. This is a gift. I'm going to build a system around it. He built the system. I played within it. We had a season that, in retrospect, was the year my career became something other than promising. It became actual, realized, established. I was called into the national team conversation for the first time at 26. Not a call-up initially. A conversation, the same kind that sometimes precedes a call-up and sometimes doesn't. I went into that conversation the way I went into every important conversation by that point. Completely prepared, completely myself, with nothing to prove and everything to demonstrate. They called me up. The first national team training camp was the most intimidating environment I had been in since the Capital City Academy as a 14-year-old from a small town. These were, by definition, the best players my country produced. I was among them but not yet fully at home among them. And I felt that the way you feel the edge of a new space, with a specific hyper-awareness of someone who knows they belong and also knows that belonging has to be earned. I earned it. The way I always earn things. By 27, I was a regular starter. By 28, something that I had not dared to fully plan for was becoming real. The national team was in World Cup qualification. And we were doing well. And I was central to how we were doing well. The World Cup. I had watched every World Cup since I was old enough to understand what I was watching. I had watched it on a small television in my parents' house, on a bigger television in the academy, on screens in hotel rooms and training facilities and the houses of people I barely knew. I had watched it the way you watch something that you want so badly that wanting it feels dangerous. And now it was not a thing I was watching. It was a thing I was approaching. We qualified in November. The night the final qualification result came through, a draw that was sufficient, that put us through. I was on the pitch when the full-time whistle went, and I stood there for a moment before any celebration reached me, just stood there, in the specific silence that precedes the explosion, and I thought of the broken crossbar pitch. I thought of Mama Eudora on her cloth on the concrete step. Then the explosion of noise arrived and it swept me away and I was celebrating with my teammates and I was crying and laughing and none of it felt real. I called her that night. It was after 11. I had never called at that hour in all the years of Sunday calls, because Mama Eudora went to bed at 9:30 and I respected that schedule with the reverence of someone who understands that certain people's rest is sacred. She answered on the second ring. I was waiting, she said. You knew I'd call? I was watching, she said. I have the television set on a channel that shows these things now. My neighbor's son set it up for me. A pause. Henry. Yes, Mama. We're going to the World Cup, she said. And her voice had something in it I'd never heard before. Something that was the precise emotional pitch of a person who has been holding a hope for so long that when it becomes real, the release of it takes over the whole voice. We, she said. Not you. We. I didn't understand that word fully until later. Not everyone was joyful. I want to tell you this part because it's important. Because the full picture matters, and the full picture includes the people who couldn't get out of the way of their own small-heartedness, even in a moment that deserved to be bigger than all of it. There was a family gathering, the kind that gets organized by committee and families, where no one person is fully responsible for the guest list, and so everyone ends up there, including the people you'd have tactfully not invited if the decision had been yours. It was my Uncle George's house. George was my father's brother, a man who had specific and loudly held opinions about everything, whose opinions had the particular quality of being delivered with maximum confidence and minimum information. I was there because my father had asked me to come, and I had come because I loved my father and because he deserved to have his son at a family gathering in what was, objectively, a significant moment for our family. The house was full. Extended family, neighbors, family friends who became family through proximity. There was food. There was celebration, genuine in its way, because my country qualifying for the World Cup was something that mattered to everyone there. But there is always a but. My Uncle George found me in the kitchen, where I had escaped the main room briefly to breathe, and he put his hand on my shoulder in the way men do when they're about to deliver something they think is wisdom. "Henry," he said, "all of this, the national team, the qualification, it's good. It's very good. But I want to say something to you, man to man." I waited. "Don't get too far ahead of yourself," he said. "The World Cup is a big stage. Some players get there and the pressure is too much. I've seen it. I've watched it happen to great players. They get to the big tournament and something happens. The stage is too big and they shrink." He shook his head. "I just don't want you to embarrass yourself. Or the family. Don't embarrass yourself. Or the family." I looked at my Uncle George for a moment. "Thank you, Uncle," I said. Which is what you say when you have learned that there are some conversations that deserve no more investment than a thank you. He nodded, satisfied that he had delivered his wisdom, and went back to the main room. My cousin Peter, George's son, always angling toward relevance through association, found me a few minutes later and said, with a carefully casual tone of someone who has practiced what they're about to say, "You know, I always used to say you'd make it. I used to tell people, that's my cousin, he's going to be something." Peter had never said that. In the years we were growing up, Peter had said many things about me that were considerably less generous, including, at a family gathering when I was 17 and had just come home from the academy for a visit, that my football was not bad for someone who learned on a village pitch, and that not everyone can make it in the real leagues. "That's kind, Peter," I said. He laughed and slapped my shoulder. The laugh of someone who wants you to think they've been with you the whole time. Who wants the warmth of your success to touch them without the discomfort of acknowledging that they spent years standing in the cold. My father found me at the edge of the gathering. He was quieter than everyone else, which was his way. He stood beside me for a moment, both of us looking at the room. "I should have believed more," he said. "Not looking at me. Looking at the room." "Dad." "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "I'm not asking you to say it's fine. I'm just saying it. I should have believed more. Your mother and I, we were afraid. Afraid of what would happen to you if it didn't work. And that fear, it was ours, not yours. It shouldn't have been on you." I looked at my father. Thomas Osei, mechanic, man of few words, man who had told me to work on my grades and hadn't driven me to a single training session. Also the man who had, when I was 7 years old and playing on that broken pitch, come and watched from the far end and said nothing and then walked home in silence. I had thought for years that the silence meant disinterest. I was understanding, finally, that it meant something else. The silence of someone afraid to want something too much in case it didn't come. "I know," I said. "I know it was fear, Dad." He nodded, put his hand briefly on my shoulder, not Uncle George's performance of wisdom, just the hand of a father who is doing the quiet work of not hiding things anymore. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Whatever happens." "Whatever happens," I said. We stood there for a moment, side by side, and I thought about how much of life is people arriving at the right things late. How rarely anyone is on time with love. How the work is not demanding that people were on time but deciding what to do with them now that they've arrived. I need to stop here for just a second. Because if you're watching this, you probably have someone in your life like Mama Eudora. Or maybe you've been wishing you did. That person who sees you, really sees you, before the evidence is there. Before the results confirm what they already know. Before the world catches up to what they've been quietly certain about for years. And maybe you also have people like Uncle George. Like Peter. Like Kwaku and Dennis and Otto. People who love you in the complicated, imperfect, sometimes self-serving way that human beings love each other. This story is about both kinds of people. and about what you do when the world gets loud with doubt and you have to find the signal underneath it. If you're new to this channel, hit subscribe right now. Every story we tell here is for the person who needs to hear that the journey is real, the difficulty is real, and the arrival, when it comes, is earned. And if you've been here a while, share this one. Send it to the person in your life who is carrying a dream in the middle of their hard middle. The one who needs to know it's worth carrying. Subscribe, share, and let's get back into it. Because we haven't gotten to the tin yet. And the tin is everything. The World Cup camp started 6 weeks before the opening group match. 6 weeks of preparation that was the most intensive, most carefully constructed, most demanding professional experience of my life to that point. The coaching staff left nothing to chance. Tactical sessions, physical periodization, video analysis, set-piece work, opposition scouting that was so detailed it included the individual body language patterns of specific defenders under pressure. I was our starting number 8. The engine room of the midfield, the role Coach Darko had built me for and that the national team manager had adopted with his own tactical intelligence layered on top. My job was to press, to recycle, to read the spaces, to be the player who made the team's shape functional rather than theoretical. I had been preparing for this my whole career. And still, in the quiet of the early mornings before training, something in me registered the scale of it with a kind of awe that no amount of professionalism fully eliminates. The World Cup is the World Cup. There is nothing that is actually like it until you're inside it. My family had decided, or rather, my mother and father had decided, with input from nobody, that they were not coming. The cost was too much, the distance was too great, the logistics were too complex. My mother said this on the phone with the careful practicality of a woman who has made a decision and is communicating it as fact rather than opening it for discussion. I said I understood. I did understand. Flights to the host country, accommodation, tickets. It was real money, more money than they had comfortable access to on short notice. I told them I would watch out for them on the screen. They said they would watch every match. I called Mama Eudora on the Sunday before camp started. I won't be able to call on Sundays during the tournament, I said. The schedule won't allow it. I'll call when I can. I know, she said. Are you watching? Do you have the television sorted? Everything is sorted, she said. And there was something in her voice, a quality I couldn't quite name, something contained and deliberate, that I filed away without fully examining. I'll play for you, I said. Which is what I said every time before a big match. It was our ritual. I know you will, she said. And then, which was not the ritual. Henry. Yes, Mama. Whatever happens, whatever the result is or isn't, I want you to know something. What? I have been watching you since you were 7 years old on that pitch. And every single time I have watched you, I have seen the same thing. A boy, a man now, who gives everything. Everything. No more, because there isn't any more. No less, because you don't know how to give less. She paused. 80,000 people are going to see what I've been seeing for 30 years. I just wanted to say that. Before it happens. I sat in the quiet of my room in the training camp and I held the phone and I didn't say anything for a moment. Mama, I said eventually. Yes. I love you. I know, my child, she said. I love you too. Now go and rest. You have work to do. Our group stage was genuinely difficult. We had been drawn into what the media had cheerfully labeled a group of death, with 2 former champions and a team that had been building quietly for a decade and was, on any objective analysis, better than their seeding suggested. Our first match, a draw. Reasonable, a point earned, but not the statement we'd wanted. I played the full 90 and I was decent. Not excellent, decent, which in a World Cup group stage opener is a data point, not a verdict. The second match. We won. A goal in each half. The second one coming from a press I initiated, a ball I played to our striker who scored. My contribution was in the system rather than the score sheet, which is fine, which is what the role asks for, but it's harder to photograph. Third match. We needed a result to go through. 47 minutes in, we were behind by 1, and the match was at the kind of tipping point where the result could go either way and the difference would be something small. A moment, a decision, a single piece of technical quality in the right place at the right time. I had a chance in the 51st minute. A ball that broke to me at the edge of the box, unexpected, not what I'd anticipated, and I had a fraction of a second to decide, and I decided wrong. I hit it too early, off the outside of my right foot, and it went wide by a distance that felt enormous in that moment. I stood there for a second, and then I turned and organized the press, and we won the ball back, and 20 minutes later our winger scored the equalizer, and we drew the match and went through on goal difference. I played well in the knockout stages. I played the way I'd been playing all tournament. Committed, precise, the kind of performance that doesn't necessarily produce the highlight but produces the foundation on which highlights are built. The quarterfinal was when it clicked. Here is what I knew going into the quarterfinal. My parents were watching from home. My former coaches were watching. My country was watching. The players I'd come up through the academy with were watching, including Felix, who I knew through the grapevine had become a minor pundit on a local sports show and who had, I had been told, said some generous things about my development in recent weeks that he had not said during the development itself. Here is what I did not know going into the quarterfinal. Mama Eudora was in the stadium. I didn't know. Nobody told me. There had been a conspiracy, I used the word warmly, involving my mother, my Auntie Comfort, Mama Eudora's neighbor's son who had set up the television channel, and apparently 3 separate travel agencies before the right combination of flights and accommodation was found. And the tin. 8 years of coins. 8 years of adding to it. Every week, consistently, sometimes a lot, sometimes a little, always something. She had started the tin not when I qualified for the World Cup, not when I made the national team, not when I signed my professional contract. She had started it the year I went to the academy. The year I was 13 and got on a bus to the capital with a bag and a football and her voice in my head saying, "You'll show them exactly what I've been watching." She had decided that day, and this is what my mother told me afterward, crying, because the full story had only been told to her recently. She had decided that day that I was going to the World Cup. Not as a possibility. As a certainty. She had started saving for it the way you start saving for something you've already decided is going to happen, and you just need to accumulate the proof. 8 years. Every week, coins in the tin. She never told me the amount. I don't know the amount even now. She considers it private. What I know is that it was enough for her flight, her accommodation, her match ticket, and the fabric paint she used to write my name on her hat. My mother had helped with the logistics, the booking, the arrangements, the physical getting of an 81-year-old woman who had never been on an airplane onto an airplane and through an international airport and into a hotel room and eventually into a seat in a World Cup quarterfinal. This had not been simple. My mother, who I now understood had known about the tin for at least 2 years and kept the secret with a discipline that I have since told her I profoundly respect, had made every arrangement without telling me. When I scored that goal, 78th minute, the ball dropping, the instinct, the net moving, the weather sound of 67,000 people, the stadium camera found the family section. My mother was watching from home, and she told me later that she screamed so loud the neighbor knocked on the wall. But in the stadium, in that family section, Mama Eudora stood up. And the camera found her. And 67,000 people, who did not know her, who did not know about the tin or the Sunday calls or the concrete step on the broken pitch or the 8 years of coins. 67,000 people saw this tiny, magnificent woman in her Sunday dress and her painted hat, waving that flag, and they understood something. Without being told. Without context. They understood they were looking at love in its purest, most committed, most long-sustained form. And they cheered for her. I found out she was there 30 seconds before the camera caught her. One of our team officials found me in the celebrations near the corner flag. He was holding his phone out and he was saying my name, and something in his face made me stop even in the middle of the noise. I looked at the phone. There was a message from my mother. It said, "Mama Eudora is in the stadium. Section C, row 12. She's been there the whole match. She didn't want you to know beforehand. She didn't want to put pressure on you. She saved for it for 8 years. Go find her." I read it twice. And then I looked at the big screen above the far end of the pitch because the crowd's attention had shifted there, and on the screen was Mama Eudora, waving her flag, wearing my number, 67,000 people cheering for her. I started running toward the family section before I fully decided to. The security protocol at a World Cup is not designed for players running into the family section unscheduled, and there were several moments of confusion and radio communication as I explained what I was doing to people whose job it was to maintain order and who were understandably skeptical about a post-match run into the stands. But the team official was with me and my credential was visible, and eventually the right doors opened. I found her in Section C, row 12. She was still standing. She was smaller than I remembered, or I was bigger, or the context made the scale of everything different. She was 81 years old and she had been on 3 planes in the last 48 hours, and she had sat through 90+ minutes of football in a stadium full of strangers, and she was standing with that flag in her hand and her hat at a slightly adjusted angle, and her face. Her face. I have thought about how to describe her face in that moment, and I don't think I can do it adequately. So I'll just tell you what I felt when I saw it. I felt like 7 years old. Like the first time she sat on the concrete step with her cloth on the pitch, and I scored and looked up to find her watching, and the watching was the thing that made it real. I felt like the sum total of every Sunday phone call. Like the weight of the tin, full of coins, proof of 30 years of belief deposited in small increments over the course of a life. I got to her row and she looked at me and I said, "Mama." And she said, I told you from the beginning." And I held her. In a World Cup stadium, still in my kit, sweating and exhilarated and undone, I held my 81-year-old grandmother, and she held me back with the complete, total strength of a woman who has been waiting 30 years for this particular hug. Around us, the people in the neighboring seats, strangers from different countries, people who had come to watch a football match, were quietly, completely losing it. I noticed this later in a video someone took on their phone, which circulated afterward. The couple next to her. The group of men in the rows below. Just crying. Because love at that scale, witnessed in person, is contagious in the best way. She pulled back and she looked at my face, the way she always looked at my face. Completely, specifically, the way she'd been looking at me since I was 7. "The goal," she said. "You saw it." "I saw it." She nodded once. "Like I always said. You know where the ball is going before it gets there." I laughed. I couldn't help it. 30 years later, 81 years old, in a World Cup stadium, she was still giving me the same specific analysis she'd given me on the concrete step. "Come," I said. "I want everyone to meet you." We reached the semi-final. I want to tell you something about playing the semi-final of a World Cup when you know your grandmother is in the stadium. It is simultaneously the most pressure you have ever felt and the most free you have ever been. The pressure because it's a World Cup semi-final, and the entire weight of everything that has brought you to this point is fully present in the atmosphere of it. Free because she was there. And if there was ever a proof in my life that someone believed in me fully, without condition, without the need for the result to be any particular thing, she was in that stadium. She'd paid for it in coins over 8 years. The outcome of the match could not change what that meant. We won the semi-final. A hard-fought, genuinely excellent football match that went to extra time and was decided by a goal in the 104th minute. I played every minute of it. When the final whistle went and I knew we were in the final, the actual final, the World Cup final, I looked up at the section where I knew she was sitting. I couldn't see her from the pitch. The stadium is too big, the sections are too far, the distance doesn't allow for that specificity. But I knew she was there. And that was enough. And then the final. I won't describe every moment of the final. What I will tell you is that it was the kind of match that happens once in a career if you're lucky. The kind where everything you've built over 20 years is present in each moment, where you move with the complete confidence of someone who has done the work and knows the work is in them. We went behind in the 35th minute. A goal against the run of play, the kind that makes you reassess whether fortune is with you tonight. The dressing room at halftime was quiet. Not panicked, quiet. The specific quiet of professionals who have been in hard situations and know that panic is the least useful response. Our manager spoke. Not a speech. A conversation. He talked about what we'd done in the first half that was good. He talked about where the opposition was vulnerable in the second half. He talked about belief not as a feeling but as a choice. The decision to act as if the outcome you want is achievable because it is, because you have the ability, and the outcome only becomes impossible when you decide it is. The second half. I was everywhere in that second half. Not because I forced it, Because the game opened up in the way games open up when your team decides collectively to make them open up, and the spaces I'd been reading all tournament were suddenly there, wider, more available, more willing. Our equalizer came in the 63rd minute. A goal I played a part in, a ball I won back, drove forward, played wide, the overlap, the cross, the finish. My name in the build-up, if not on the score sheet. 78th minute. The ball dropped. The specific, unrepeatable, unreasonable alignment of a football at the edge of a box in a World Cup final. I hit it. Precision. The exact spot the goalkeeper couldn't reach. The net moved. 67,000 people. And in Section C, row 12, Mama Eudora stood up. I ran. The corner flag. The pile of teammates. The noise that isn't noise anymore. And then, while I'm still in the pile, while the match is still going, while 12 minutes of football still remained between us and the thing we'd been building toward our whole lives, I heard something underneath the general roar. 67,000 people. Henry. 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 My name. The whole stadium. I extracted myself from the pile long enough to look up at the screen. And there she was, on the big screen, because the cameras had found her again, because the world had not forgotten the tiny woman in the Sunday dress from the quarterfinal. There was Mama Eudora, flag waving, hat painted with my name, chanting with 67,000 people. We held on. 12 minutes. The longest 12 minutes of my life. Every clearance, every tackle, every moment when the ball came near our goal, my heart was trying to exit through my ribcage. And then came the final whistle. World champions, alas. The celebration lasted, in various forms, for about 3 days. There are photographs from those 3 days that exist in the internet as evidence. The team photograph with the trophy, the medal ceremony, the parade through the streets of the host city. In one of the photographs that circulated most widely, I am in my kit with my medal around my neck and Mama Eudora is beside me, still in her Sunday dress, still wearing the painted hat, holding the trophy with both hands. That photograph traveled. It went around the world in the way things go around the world now. News articles. Social media. Segments on sports broadcasts in countries where my name would have meant nothing before this tournament and now meant something. The caption that attached itself to the photograph, in every iteration I saw, he scored the winning goal. She saved coins for 8 years to watch him do it. The world, when it met Mama Eudora, understood immediately. No translation required. Interviews were requested. Many of them. I did a handful, selective. I was protective of her the way you're protective of something that the world cannot handle carelessly. But she did one. One interview with a journalist she decided she liked, and in that interview she was entirely, completely herself. Precise, warm, funny, clear. The journalist asked her when she knew. When she knew I would be here, at a World Cup, in this moment. She looked at him over her glasses. When he was 7, she said. That young. The question is not whether I knew, she said. The question is why everyone else took so long to see it. The journalist laughed. The clip of that moment was, according to various measures, among the most watched clips from the tournament that did not contain actual football. Uncle George called. He called my mother, actually, because I had never given him my direct number, a fact that now struck me as prophetic. My mother relayed his message. He was proud. He'd been saying from the beginning that I had something special, he'd like to come and visit when I was next home. I told my mother to tell him he was welcome. Felix, the boy from the academy, the one who'd called me village for 2 years, who had become a local sports pundit, filmed a segment for his show about me. It was actually generous. Genuinely generous. He talked about my development at the academy with the specific knowledge of someone who had been there, and he said things that were accurate and kind. He did not mention village. He did not mention the parking lot. I watched the segment. I thought about how people change when the evidence becomes undeniable. How sometimes it takes a 67,000-person stadium for someone to update a belief they formed in a training ground parking lot 20 years ago. I thought about whether that generosity was real or performed. I decided it didn't fully matter. What matters is what people do, and what Felix did was say something generous. I took the thing at its face value and let the rest go. Kwaku called. I picked up. I don't know why. I had gone 2 years without picking up, and in the aftermath of the tournament, in the specific clarity that extraordinary experience creates, I picked up. "Henry," he said. "Kwaku." He paused first and then said, "I watched every match." "That's good," I responded. Then came another pause. A longer one this time. "I have not been a good friend to you," he said. "Not for a long time. I think you know that." "Yes," I said. "I'm not calling because of the World Cup," he said. "I'm calling because I've been carrying it. What I became in our friendship. What I let it become. And I need you to know that I see it." I sat with that for a moment. "I appreciate that," I said. And I meant it. Not in the way that means everything is fine and unchanged. It isn't and it can't be. But in the way that means, I see that this cost you something to say, and I receive it. Is there space for?" He stopped. "I'm not asking for what we had," he said. "I know that's not available. I just want to know if there's anything. Any kind of anything." I thought about what Mama Eudora had said. Some people are in your life for a chapter. A chapter ending doesn't erase what was in it. "Come and find me when I'm next home," I said. "We'll have a meal. We'll see what's there." He exhaled. "Thank you," he said. "Thank Mama Eudora," I said. "She taught me that." There are things I understand now that I didn't when I was 7, or 13, or 19, or 21 lying in a rehabilitation bed wondering if the thing that made me was permanently diminished. I want to tell you the ones that matter most. The first is about love that shows up before the evidence does. Mama Eudora believed in me when there was no statistical basis for her belief. When I was 7 on a broken pitch, the evidence consisted of a child who was better than other children at one specific thing in one specific small-town context. That is not a sample size that justifies 8 years of coins in a tin. What she was doing was not optimism. It was not wishful thinking. It was something more precise and more demanding. She was paying attention. She had watched me long enough and carefully enough to see something real. And then she committed to that real thing with the full weight of her life, quietly, without announcement, over 8 years. That is what it means to see someone. Not to tell them you believe in them. To demonstrate it in the currency of your actual time and actual resources and actual sustained commitment. I have been trying, ever since I understood what she did, to learn how to do that for other people. To pay that attention. To commit that clearly. It is harder than it sounds, because the world is loud and fast, and the kind of seeing Mama Eudora practiced requires a quality of presence that takes effort. The second is about doubt and its proper use. My father's doubt was real. My mother's fear was real. Uncle George's caution was real. The doubt of the academy environment, the friends who faded, the mockery that ran underneath everything from the village nickname to the dinner table rewriting of history. All of it was real. None of it was true. And the work of my life, the actual work, the daily work, the getting up and doing the thing even when the doubt was loudest, was the work of making a distinction between what is real and what is true. The doubt was real. The limitation it claimed for me was not true. I had to keep choosing which one to live inside. That is not a once-and-done choice. You don't make it once and move on. You make it every day. Every morning you get up and either you're living inside the doubt or you're living inside the truth. And the choice is yours to make and no one can make it for you. The third is about the people who arrive late. Uncle George was wrong about me. Felix was cruel to me. Kwaku, Dennis, and Otto used me. My parents were afraid in ways that had real costs. They are all still people I love, in their various capacities. Not all the same way. Not all with the same trust. But love, the kind of love that doesn't require people to have been perfect to deserve it, is big enough to hold the complicated truth about them all. I'm not holding a grudge. That's important for me to say clearly, not because it makes me noble but because I understand what holding it would cost. Grudges are weight. Weight slows you down. I have things to do and places to be, and I cannot afford to be slowed. I let them go. I hold what's good. I keep moving. The fourth is about Mama Eudora, specifically, because she deserves her own lesson. There is someone in most people's lives, not always, but often, who sees them before the world does, who holds the belief before there's anything to believe in except the raw material, who shows up on concrete steps with their cloth and sits through every match even when their knees hurt. If you have that person, tell them. Tell them what their attention has meant. Don't wait for the stadium. Don't wait for the chant. Don't wait for the photograph that goes around the world. Tell them on a Tuesday. Tell them on a Sunday at 7 o'clock. Tell them while the tin is still being filled and the destination is still being decided. Because I had 30 years of Sunday calls and I am so grateful for every single one, and I also know that the photograph in the stadium, while extraordinary, while something I will carry for the rest of my life, is not the thing that matters most. The thing that matters most was the concrete step. The thing that matters most was the voice on the phone saying, "What did you do in your rehabilitation this week?" The thing that matters most was a woman deciding at 13 that I was going to the World Cup and that she was going to be there when I arrived. Tell your person while the arriving is still happening. Mama Eudora turned 82 3 months after the World Cup. We celebrated in the town. Not a small gathering, a gathering the size of which Mama Eudora pretended to find excessive while very clearly enjoying every moment of. There was food enough for 3 times the number of people present. There was music. My mother had organized it with the same logistical precision she'd brought to getting an 81-year-old on a plane, which is to say it was perfect. In the kitchen of Mama Eudora's house, the house where I'd sat at the table and told her about the scout, about the academy, about the injury, about the friends who faded, about Felix and the parking lot and the professional contract and the national team. In that kitchen, the tin was still on the shelf above the sink. It was empty now. She'd spent what was in it. I stood there looking at it for a moment when I went to help her with something in the kitchen, and she came in behind me and saw me looking. "It served its purpose," she said. "Yes," I said. "It might have a new purpose," she said, with a particular quality of deliberate mystery I'd known my whole life. I looked at her. "What are you putting in it now?" She smiled. "You have a teammate," she said. "The young one. The one you mentioned on the phone last month. The one from the village smaller than ours." I thought of my teammate Daniel, 22, just broken into the squad, from a place that made my hometown look metropolitan. Extraordinary player. Carrying the whole weight of being discovered late and having to prove it was worth waiting for. "Yes," I said carefully. "The next World Cup is in 4 years," she said. I looked at the empty tin on the shelf above the sink. "Mama," I said. "Absolutely not. I will buy the ticket." She looked at me over her glasses. "Henry, who is filling this tin?" "You cannot." "Who is filling this tin?" I looked at her. 82 years old. The most stubborn, most loving, most specifically attentive person I have ever known. "You are," I said. "Good," she said. "Now go back to the party. You're needed." I went back to the party. And in the kitchen of her house, on the shelf above the sink, a new purpose was beginning. I want to read you something. After the tournament, when everything had settled and the world had moved on to the next thing the way the world does, I found something in the pocket of my kit bag that I hadn't put there. A letter. Folded carefully, in the handwriting of someone whose hands are arthritic and whose letters have to be formed more slowly than they once did, but who still writes with the precision of a person who respects language. She had slipped it into the bag before she flew home. I found it a week after she left. I'm not going to read it all to you. It's mine. Some things are yours and you don't share all of them, even with people you trust. But one part. She wrote, "Henry, I did not save the coins to see you win. Winning is beautiful and I am so glad you won. But I would have saved them to see you lose, too. I saved them to see you. To be in the room where you are doing the thing you were born to do. That is enough, my child. That is more than enough. That is everything a grandmother can ask for, to see her child become what they always were, even before the world knew it. I knew. I always knew. And now everybody knows. You're welcome." She wrote, "You're welcome." She's 82 years old and she's unbearable and I love her more than I know how to say. Here are the lessons I learned from Henry's story. Mama Eudora didn't just say she believed in Henry. She put coins in a tin for 8 years. Real resources. Real time. Real sustained commitment over the distance of a whole career. When someone tells you they believe in you, ask yourself, what have they put in the tin? Belief that costs nothing is just goodwill. Belief that costs something is love. Lesson 2. The people who diminish you are often carrying something that has nothing to do with you. Felix called him village because the talent gap threatened him. Kwaku, Dennis, and Otto repositioned themselves because the distance between Henry's life and theirs was uncomfortable. Uncle George offered caution because he didn't know how to be generous with his hope. None of this was really about Henry. It was about the people doing it, and their own complicated relationships with aspiration and fear. Understanding this doesn't make the hurt disappear, but it makes it possible to put down. Lesson 3. The hard middle is where the character forms. The injury. The rehabilitation. The 60 applications in the Bella story, the parking lot, the 3 friends who faded. Nobody tells the story of the middle, because the middle is not photogenic. But the middle is everything. What you do when it's hard and unseen and uncertain is who you are, and who you are is what produces the goal in the 78th minute. Lesson 4. The people who arrive late still deserve a welcome. Henry let Kwaku back in. He went to his father's gathering. He watched Felix's generous segment without demanding it be more than it was. Not because these people were redeemed. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't, that's not for Henry to decide. But because closing every door is its own kind of cost, and Henry had learned to travel light. Lesson 5. Tell your person while the arriving is still happening. Don't wait for the stadium. Don't wait for the chant. Find the Mama Eudora in your life, or be the Mama Eudora, and do the work of that love now, on a Tuesday, on a Sunday at 7 o'clock, while the tin is still filling and the destination is still ahead. If you just watch the whole story of Henry and Mama Eudora, from that broken crossbar pitch to that World Cup stadium, I need to ask you something. Who is the person in your life who put coins in a tin for you? It might be your grandmother. It might be a parent who arrived late and is doing the work now. It might be a teacher who wrote something in red pen. It might be a coach who took a chance on a kid from a town too small to be on most maps. Whoever it is, can I challenge you to do something today? Not next week. Today. Tell them. Text them. Call them. Show up. Tell them what their belief has cost them in the best way. In the tin they filled, in the Sundays they kept, in the specific attention they never withdrew. And if you don't have that person yet, be that person for someone else. Start the tin. Show up to the concrete step. Learn to see someone before the evidence arrives. That is the whole story. That is what we're doing here. Now here's what I need from you. 1. Subscribe. Right now. If this story moved you, if it gave you something, if it reminded you of someone or something or some version of yourself you needed to remember, subscribe. This is the channel that tells these stories every single week, and you deserve to be here for every one of them. 2. Like this video. It tells us the story mattered. It helps us reach the next person who needs it. It takes you 2 seconds and it matters more than you know. 3. Share this with someone. I don't care who. Send it to the person who is in the hard middle of their story right now. Send it to the person who has a Mama Eudora they haven't called lately. Send it to the person who gave up on the dream and needs to remember why they started. Share it. Stories are how we carry each other. 4. Comment below. Tell me, who filled the tin for you? And if you haven't told them yet, go tell them. Come back and tell me you did. This channel exists because stories like this one are real. They happen. People survive the broken crossbar pitch. People come back from the injury. People make it to the stadium. And when they do, they don't do it alone. They do it with a Mama Eudora somewhere in the stands, in a hat with their name painted on it, waving a flag that has been waiting 8 years for this moment. We'll see you in the next one. Go call your person.